I've got a real life debt collector in the studio, and I want to know if I don't pay a debt collector, can they screw up my credit report? Let's begin.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
My guest today is Blair DeMarco-Wettlaufer, the Chief Operations Officer of Kingston Data and Credit, a collection agency with offices in Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. Blair has been in the business for 100 years, so he knows what he's talking about. So Blair, welcome back. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me yet again.
Well, I think you are about as old as me, so we're probably both in the same age range. Now, let me start by saying that you are the most popular external guest here on Debt Free in 30. Obviously, our pal Ted is on all the time, but so this is episode number 501. So you get to follow the epic 500th broadcast from last week. This is your 8th solo appearance here on the podcast. Your first appearance was back in 2015, episode 20. Okay, so we were both young people at the time.
I had hair.
Yeah, and mine wasn't great. Stop the Collection Calls. Advice from Blair DeMarco-Wettlaufer was the title of that show. And even though it's over 9 years old and it's an audio only, because we weren't even doing video back then, we've got it on YouTube, and it's still our 15th most viewed episode ever. That makes just no sense to me at all.
Power of Google.
That's it, man. Your fourth appearance, episode 264, September 2019, How to Negotiate with a Collection Agent, is our second most viewed podcast ever. So in total, your 7 previous podcast appearances on YouTube, well over 100,000 views, and then a huge ton on the audio version as well. I don't know how many because I didn't bother to count them up. So thank you for making the trip back to the studio here in Kitchener. So today's question is, if I don't pay you, can you screw up my credit score? Now, I want to set the stage here.
Sure.
And as I said, we've done a bunch of other podcasts, and I encourage everyone to go listen to them all. I'll put links in the show notes because I know how it works. If I don't pay a debt, like a credit card, bank loan, whatever it is, cell phone bill, eventually the lender turns the debt over to a collection agent like you. You'll send me a letter. You'll call me. You'll use every legal trick in the book to collect money, which is fine. That's your job. And I think everyone agrees that we should pay our debts. That's kind of what keeps the economy running.
If you can, yeah.
If you can, you should. Absolutely. So you're going to say to me, well, if you don't pay, I'm going to keep calling and maybe I'll eventually sue you and garnish your wages. Okay, fine. Now, there's another threat you can make, and that is, well, if you don't pay, I'm going to report this debt to the credit bureau. And that's what we want to talk about today.
That's where we start.
That's a great threat. Okay.
Well, because 20 years ago compared to now, your credit rating matters so much.
It's your entire life. Yes.
Really?
We obsess over it. We got all these apps on our phone that tell us everything.
Yeah.
Now, I want to start with a case study. And you are familiar with this story. Back on March 12th, 2024, I got an email from a reporter at the CBC in Ottawa, and in his email he said, and I quote, "A bunch of people in Ottawa are complaining that their credit scores have taken a hit because they've only recently been notified about City of Ottawa tickets that date back many, many years, and in some cases they can't even remember them." So here's the story, and again, you know the story, but the City of Ottawa, like every other city and town in the country, issues fines for minor offenses like parking tickets. And some people pay them, some people don't. And apparently the City of Ottawa has something like $50 million in unpaid tickets going back many years, which is a lot of money. And obviously that could be used to fund city services. So naturally they want to collect the money. So how does the city collect unpaid tickets? Well, they say it right on their site. They issue a bill with the due date, and then they send a courtesy reminder before the due date. And if you don't pay, it's referred to Revenue Services, which is the city's in-house collection agency, and they call and send letters and try to collect. And if after a period of time, generally around 6 months, you haven't paid, they refer the debt to a third-party collection agency. So in January 2024, it appears that the City of Ottawa signed a 5-year contract with a big collection agency, and that collection agency reported 103,000 unpaid Provincial Offences Act fines and 3,000 unpaid water bills to the credit bureau, and some of those debts went back as far as 20 years. Now, that got everyone's attention, so that's the backstory. And I don't want to comment on the specific situation because you and I aren't in Ottawa and don't have anything to do with that particular situation. You are not the collection agency involved.
No.
But I wanted you to walk me through the law. Now, there is one law called the Limitations Act.
Yes.
That we're going to gloss over because this is only a half-hour show. The City of Ottawa issued a memo saying there is no statute of limitations for a conviction of a set fine. And they may be right.
They might be right.
I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. I did look in the Provincial Offences Act, Section 76, which says a proceeding shall not be commenced after the expiration day of any limitation period prescribed by any other act for the offense, or where no limitation period is prescribed after 6 months after the due date, which the offense was or is alleged to have been committed. So I don't know, maybe it's a 6-month period. The General Limitations Act, and again, I'll put links to all this in the stuff in the show notes, is 2 years. So I don't know whether there's a limitation period or not.
But convictions or bylaws, there might be weird exceptions.
Exactly. So I'm not going to make any further comments on that. If anyone's a lawyer, leave a lesson or leave a note in the comments. But I do want to talk about the credit bureau. So let's start at the beginning. When a collection agency like you is hired to collect a debt, and you've explained this to us before, a client will say, hey, Blair, I've got 1,000 people who I want you to collect. And so they send you some kind of electronic secret file, and then you punch it into the computer, and then what? What happens next?
Well, ideally, we reach out to the person and they pay. And honestly, 9 out of 10 people that end up in collections, they didn't know about the bill. They forgot about the bill. They're trying to make ends meet. They had a case of life happen to them. Most people that we deal with say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. How can I take care of this? Now, there are people we can't find or can't reach. We don't get a valid phone number. They've up and moved and they're nowhere to be found. And there are people who are, I refuse to pay this. I'm stressed. I'm just going to yell. I don't want to take care of it. There are all sorts of reasons why somebody might not pay. Now, if they don't pay, our biggest leverage is the credit bureau. Is reporting debts to the bureau. Now, obviously, we don't want to do that on day one. That's not legal. We don't want to even do it on day 7. We want to give the person a chance to connect with us and work with us. And we can tell them, look, if you take care of this, we won't report this to the bureau. And then everybody wins.
Okay, so let's go through this then.
Sure.
So you call me and I go, oh, okay, I don't remember that debt. And by the way, I don't even know who you are.
Got to send you a letter.
Okay, so number one, you have to communicate with me in writing.
Yes.
And what does a letter mean? Can you send me an email?
Yes, it can be by regular mail, or the law changed in 2018 in Ontario. It can be an email. It can also be an email in BC and Nova Scotia. And that, but it still has to be a letter, and it has to say certain things. Who am I? Who am I representing? How much is the debt? When was the debt incurred? If it's Bank of Nova Scotia, what product was it? So it's clear it was your auto loan or your Visa. And the Ontario has a whole bunch of consumer rights that have to be in the letter word for word. If you are a consumer, you have the right to this and that and the other thing. Other provinces, we include it as a courtesy. When Ontario said, you must include this, it was half the back of the page of the letter.
You sent it to everybody.
Right. So we reached out to the other provinces and said, what would you like for your province in the back of the letter? So we have, if you're in Ontario, this law applies.
So if I get a call from a collection agent about some debt, then the first thing I'm going to say is, dude, you got to send me a letter.
Absolutely.
And they may have already tried to send me a letter.
But you're allowed to ask for it again.
And maybe they didn't have my address, whatever.
Right.
Or here's my email address, send it to me. Or here's my burner account, send it to that email address or whatever. But okay, so I want proof that you are validly appointed to collect this.
That's right.
Because anybody could phone me up and say, yeah, the bank wants me to collect all this money. So no, I want something in writing for you.
And then you get 6 days.
6 days from when the letter is sent?
From when it's sent.
From when it's sent. Okay. So it's Monday the 1st. You send the letter out. Basically, that means you can't contact me again until next Monday.
That's right.
Okay. And so then you sent the letter, you sent me the email, and I say, well, I'm not going to pay you.
Sure.
And the reason I'm not going to pay you is whatever. Now, maybe the reason is I'm unemployed, I don't have any money, in which case you're going to say, okay, well, I'm not really going to push you too far. Then if you got no money, then...
Well, we could get into the whole how collection agencies pursue debts from people who don't want to work with them. Once you tell us you're not going to pay, okay, understand we're going to put this on the credit bureau, and then we stop calling.
Gotcha. Okay, so
for 90 days.
And that's what I want to talk about is the credit bureau. And so, and maybe I say, look, I just don't want to pay you, or maybe I say, look, I'm going into the hospital for this big operation tomorrow, and I'll call you in a month or whatever.
Sure.
And you say, okay, cool. We still have to collect the money. So how do you report to the credit bureau, and when do you report to the credit bureau?
Okay. So there are 2 credit bureaus in Canada. There's TransUnion and Equifax.
And this is a key point here, because
Yes.
when I read through the what the city of Ottawa has done, they keep referring to the credit bureau. Well, there is no credit bureau.
Well, there are two credit
two
bureaus.
of them, right.
You know, back in the 80s and 90s, there were 5 or 6, but they all got swallowed up. And you had the credit bureau of, you know, Hamilton, the credit bureau of North Bay, the credit bureau. Now it's just Equifax and
Equifax, TransUnion. And when someone says, I'm going to report you to Experian,
well, that's U.S.
That's U.S.
That's
That
US.
has nothing to do with Canada. Okay,
That's right.
So there are 2 in Canada, Equifax and TransUnion.
Right.
So then you're going to report to the credit bureau. Walk me through the
Right.
process.
So when we report to the bureau, we send a giant flat file in what's called Metro 2 format, which it's a fancy term that the bureaus use. Both Equifax and TransUnion use the same file format, and it has all sorts of data and codes in there. It's got to have the person's name. It's got to have the person's address broken down to, well, this field is their city street number. This field is their street. This field is their street direction. It's a real pain to program. So you have to be a fairly sophisticated company to report to the bureaus. And you also have to report the amount of the debt. If you're a collection agency, you have a special code that shows it's a collection agency reporting. You have to list the original creditor. So on your bureau in the registered items section, it will say XYZ collection agency / TELUS or whatever. So it'll show who the original creditor is, and it has to show the date of the debt incurred.
Date of the debt incurred.
It's called DFD, date of first delinquency.
Date of first delinquency. And okay, what does that mean in real life then? So I have a credit card.
Yes.
And I've been paying it for a year.
Sure.
And then I don't make a payment.
Okay, so let's say you had a credit card and you stopped paying it April 1st, 2019. That was your last payment. Well, your next payment's due May 1st, 2019. You didn't pay it. 180 days go by. They finally send it to a collection agency sometime in 2020. Your date of first incurred is May 1st, 2019.
So the date it was due. So
Right.
It's not the date of the last payment.
It's the day that you missed a payment.
Date you missed the payment.
The date that the debt was known to become incurred.
So the default is known.
Right. Now, if you send this to me and you start making payments to me, the date of first delinquency is still May 1st, 2019, because that's the first delinquency. You might have been making payments with me, but the original first date is still that date that it went into default.
But the limitations period would reset.
So there are 2 limitations periods. There's the Limitations Act that says, when can you sue somebody? And then there's the Consumer Reporting Act that says, what can you report to the Bureau?
Okay, so let's break these 2 down. I already alluded to the Limitations Act. This is provincial legislation. Each province has something different, but they're all relatively the same.
That's right.
And in real simple terms, it says that you have to sue someone within 2 years of the default.
That's right.
And you've just described what default means. It's not the date of the last payment necessarily, but it's probably with, 30 days later, 60 days later, whatever.
Right.
So you got 2 years to sue someone. So if I haven't made a payment on the debt in 5 years, you can't sue me.
That's right.
Because it's past the 2-year period. However, there's a different date for credit bureau reporting. Explain that.
That's right. So under the Consumer Reporting Act for Ontario, you can't report a debt. You can't have something negative on your bureau that's older than 6 years old, 7 if there's a judgment.
Older than 6 years, which means, I guess the opposite way of saying that would be debts get purged after 6 years.
That's right. 7
Now,
if it's a judgment.
If there's a judgment.
So
Okay.
what happens is I send this giant Metro file, and I've been sending these files to the Bureau since 2012. So I send a giant file, and the Bureau takes that file and processes it and says, this debt doesn't have a delinquency date, we're not going to report it. This debt doesn't have a postal code for the consumer, we're not going to report it. This one just has B. Smith instead of Bob Smith, doesn't have a full first name, we're not going to report it. They have certain requirements they have. If I have a debt that I've been reporting since 2012, and, this debt's 9 years old, we're not going to report it. And it just doesn't get applied to the Bureau. And things are supposed to drop off. Now, the Bureau is a complicated database with lots of moving parts. Sometimes debts still stay on there after 6 years, but a consumer can always dispute them and have them removed.
And I want to make a real clear distinction here because I get credit reports from my clients all the time. I was reading one this morning. It's over there on my desk. So this is the debtor.
Yes.
The consumer has gone to, in this case, TransUnion, gotten a copy of their credit report.
Right.
And it shows stuff on their version of it going back 20 years.
Sure.
But when a lender goes to get your credit report, it only sees stuff going back 6 years.
It's supposed to. That's right.
It's supposed to.
6 years of negative items, 7 years of inquiries. There's only soft inquiries shouldn't appear. So if the consumer goes and gets their bureau, it'll show Bob Smith got his bureau. The creditor won't see that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I tell people, well, don't freak out, because I tell them, get your credit report. And we'll talk about this at the end of the show when we hit the practical advice section, but get your credit report directly from the credit bureau, not from one of these apps on your phones, which are not complete.
It's not terrible to get it from those apps,
but it's not as robust as
that
what you're
is
getting
correct.
directly.
It's sanitized.
Right,
yes.
Exactly. It's sanitized. And so if you see a debt from 10 years ago, okay, don't worry about it, because the version that a lender is going to be seeing is not going to have that.
Right.
Okay, so you got this big fancy computer thing that sends this big fancy file to the credit bureaus.
That's right.
And they go through and kick out the ones that don't meet the criteria. Everything else gets reported. And there is stuff that you are not allowed to do.
Right.
Tell me all the bad stuff. Tell me all the prohibited practices that you're not allowed to do.
Okay, as far as the bureau goes?
Yes.
Okay, I can only report a legitimate debt. I can't report an inflated amount. So, and this happens with small collection agencies and small creditors. Oh, well, it cost me money to send the file to collections, so I'll just add that fee on top. Nope, can't do it. You can only report the legitimate amount. Now, that being said, if I'm collecting for a bank and it's for a credit card and you had interest on that credit card, each month that I update the bureau, because I'm not just sending a file once, I'm re-reporting that file for me twice a month, most agencies once a month. And I'm saying, and their balance with interest today is this. So it will slowly inflate on their bureau. So I can report interest. If they bounce a check, I can report an NSF fee or something like that. If they've made a payment, I have to show their last payment debt. What I can't do, I can't make up a original creditor, so I have to report the actual creditor. So if a debt buyer buys your debt from Bank of Nova Scotia, I'm not going to show Bank of Nova Scotia as the original creditor. Or the creditor I'm representing on the bureau, I'm going to show the debt buying company. I can't artificially change the incurred date. I can't artificially change the date the account was opened with us, because when we report it to the bureau, we say we got the file on April 1st. We reported it on May 1st. The original incurred date is May 1st, 2019. So there are all sorts of dates in that file that I have to report. I can't make it magically disappear from the bureau. The bureau is a historical record.
Okay, now I'm going to stop you there.
Okay.
Because now we're getting into good stuff. Let's go back to our little case study here. In a memo, the city of Ottawa, so let's go back in time here. 103,000 people got this thing hitting their credit bureau.
Yeah.
And of course, like you said, everyone's got a phone and they've got the app on the phone.
And the app alerts them.
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, big alert that, something new's been reported. So they look into it. They go, hey, wait, this, I don't remember this thing at all. And so, of course, the city of Ottawa put out a memo saying, when all debts are collected, and I'm quoting here, I'm not making this up. When all debts are collected by a private collection agency, as opposed to a public collection, I don't know what the word private means. The agency will report the item as paid through their regular reporting cycle. Okay, that makes sense.
You're with me so far.
And remove it from the credit report.
No.
Not a thing.
No, and I run into a lot of consumers having confusion. So we'll call a consumer and say, Bob, you got to take care of this. If you take care of it, we'll not put it on your bureau. Bob works with us. That's great. Susan gets listed with us. We have no phone number for Susan. We send Susan a notice. We don't hear back from Susan. Well, we've got to report it. Susan calls in, I want to pay this. This is on my bureau. Sure, not a problem. And often that little app goes off, that twice a month we report, all of a sudden all our phones light up because people get, and it's not bad to have those apps because you get alerted the minute something's on there, not when you go to buy a house and, I didn't know about these things. But then Susan pays her bill and she goes, so can you take this off now? No, I can mark it paid. It will fix her credit score to some degree. I can't tell you what, because the credit bureaus have this secret formula that they constantly change. It'll be better than if you didn't pay it. And it'll show, KDC/XYZ company, original balance $568, current balance $0, comment paid. It will show that. Or it might show settled or what have you, but I can't remove it.
Well, why not? Because like you said, every 2 weeks, twice a month, you're sending this big data file. So if next month you just remove Susan from the data file, you're not sending it to the credit bureau.
Well, no, if I remove it from the data file, the last file I sent to the bureau with her still owing, it'll be there. So I have an obligation to update it.
So what you're saying is if I have a hammer and a nail and I pound the nail into the table, and then I yank the nail out, there's still a mark in the table.
Absolutely. Now there are what they call suppression or purge codes. Let's say we get a file and we call the consumer and, oh my God, I never borrowed that money. And the consumer finds out it's legitimately not theirs. And they call our client, the creditor, and the creditor goes, yeah, that was a mistake on our end. Our accountant was off sick that day. He didn't process the file properly. That should have never been there. We can purge or suppress that. That's a special code we send to the bureau going, this file was listed in error, should have never been here. Please take off all record of that. We can do that, but we can't do it for 10, 20, 30,000 people a month. The bureau says, when we sign a contract with the bureaus, with TransUnion, Equifax, they make us sign a contract saying we will report only legitimate debts. We will not use the bureau. We won't manipulate the bureau to get paid. So in the States, it's called pay for delete. It's a big thing where if I pay this, will you take this off my bureau? No, we can't do that up here. We can mark it as paid. We can mark it as balance $0. We can't just make it magically disappear unless there was identity theft. There was an accounting error. The account was in the wrong name. Like there was a legitimate reason to remove it. We can't just make it vanish.
But if I say to you, look, Blair, come on. I mean, this is a $500 debt. I agree I'll pay it. And in fact, what I will do is I will pay you $1,000 to push your fancy suppress code. And I understand it would look a little suspicious if you did that 30,000 times in a month. That would, raise some alarm bells. But I'm just one guy. No one's going to know. Come on. Why can't you do that?
And small collection agencies might do that. It's not ethical. But absolutely. And that's why this pay for delete thing is still persists in, like if you Google, how do I get a collection agency to delete my debt? You'll find, well, just negotiate with them this way, because some agencies do. But I'm jeopardizing my contract with Equifax and TransUnion if I do that. If they catch me doing that, they say, hey, why are you manipulating data? And then suddenly I can't report to the bureaus at all. It's not worth it.
And that was one of your best collection tactics.
Yes.
And so you blow that because I got some guy to pay me an extra $500.
Exactly.
It's not worth it. So
exactly. And word gets out that I can't report to the bureaus, and now clients don't want to use me because I don't have the tools I should have. It's a no-win scenario.
So I'd have to be paying you $100,000, $1 million to remove my $500 debt.
It's not even worth it.
And if I got that kind of money, what do I care about my credit report?
Right.
We got a question from a listener, which is kind of related to this. I get calls from collectors about the lady who had this number before me.
Yes.
I've been telling them for 5 years I'm not this lady. I've asked repeatedly to have the number removed. How can I have it removed?
Okay. So odds are that, well, there are a couple ways this could go wrong. One, collection agency calls you on a predictive dialer, a giant machine that just churns out numbers.
Robocaller.
Right. And you pick up and you say, hello. It connects you with a live agent. You tell the agent, oh my God, this is not my number. The agent tries to remove the number. If it's old or bad technology, maybe it doesn't work and the predictive dialer keeps calling. But let's assume the agent knows what they're doing. The software isn't terrible. They remove the number. Great. You stop getting calls for about 2 to 3 to 4 months. And then the big creditor goes, okay, we've tried agency A. We'll pull that file back. And now we're going to sign out all to agency B. And the creditor is giving that bad number to the next agency who has no idea what the first agency did. And now the second agency is calling. And then you say, oh, this is the wrong number. Second agency, okay, we'll remove it. Then they take it and assign it to a third agency. This happens all the time because the creditor doesn't know the number's been reassigned. And, the phone companies just kick the number over to a new person. The agency doesn't want to call wrong numbers, but they're in the business of phoning whatever numbers they have, or even worse. So you've got a number, you took over Bob's cell phone number, and you go and apply for a credit card. Now your number is showing up on the credit bureau, and now your account goes over to Ted, your phone number goes over to Ted, but your number's still showing on the bureau, garbage in, garbage out. Anyone who pulls the bureau is going, oh, well, this must be Doug's phone number. And then that perpetuates, you keep getting the calls.
And so there's not much you can do about it other than saying, it's not me. I mean, obviously you can block the number on your phone, but of course it shows up as a different number every time they call.
It can't, especially if it's going to a new agency. The best thing to do is keep your calm and just say, look, this is the wrong number. I had this number reassigned to me 2 years ago. And that will actually help the agency going, well, this debt's from 4 years ago. Well, that makes perfect sense. Wrong number. The agent doesn't want to call it wrong number.
Right. It just kind of is what it is.
Yeah.
So, okay.
But that's a legitimate complaint.
Yeah. And fortunately it happens. So, So let's end here with practical advice then. And so, back to this whole credit bureau thing then. And I had gotten an email from a guy who attended the University of Ottawa between 2001 and 2007. His credit report just started reporting the debt from the city of Ottawa for $200, which appears to be from 2005. And he told me that last month his credit score was 825, and today, because of this one small debt, his credit score dropped to 713.
Does not surprise me.
So, and you may wonder how a credit score can drop by more than 100 points due to a small
collection
debt.
Agencies.
Yeah,
if you owe money to a collection agency,
it's
that's
very
bad.
common.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know how the secret algorithm works, neither do you.
No.
But if you are late with your cell phone bill, that makes a huge difference on your credit report because they're going, it's only $100.
But does it really? Because if you have an R1 and you've made 99 months of payments and you're 30 days late and you get an R2 for that month.
We have seen it because our clients bring in their reports, and it's not like it drops your credit score 2 points. It can drop at 50 points.
That's
because
crazy.
It's such a small amount. It's like, well, if you can't pay a cell phone bill, what happens? Now, if you end up paying the cell phone bill and get caught back up, well, then your score
bounces.
It's not like it's damaged for forever. But my point is that the illegal, in my view, reporting of an old debt has serious real life consequences. What if you're applying for a car loan or a mortgage with a score of 825? No problem. You're going to qualify. If your score is 100 point less, it might be a little bit more difficult.
Or you qualify, but they give you a higher interest rate and it costs you way more than that original debt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a problem. So it's a real problem that we're talking about here. So do you have any practical advice that you would give people who are in this situation? I mean, obviously the first thing you're going to say is, well, if you pay the collection agency, then
if it's a legitimate debt, pay the collection agency. If you have something on your credit bureau, and it's great if you have those apps, now there are two different apps. One reports from Equifax, one reports from TransUnion. So you make sure you're getting the full story. Having those apps to get alerts when things go on your bureau, not a bad thing. But you should always ask for your credit bureau from each bureau once a year. They have to give it to you for free. It's not convenient like the app, but you can write to them and they have to mail it to you.
Well, it's actually much more convenient than it used to be because the whole events of 2020 made everything much more electronic. So what we do with a large number of our clients is we say, hey, let's log in right now. You can go in, you can set up an account with Equifax and TransUnion for free. And you got to verify your identity. Boom.
That's right.
And in about 80% of the cases, bam, you've got your credit report on the screen in 5 minutes.
So you should pull one and then pull the next one in 6 months, pull the next one in 6 months.
In fact, what we've found is if you pull it 2 months later, you'll still get it. So even though the law says they have to give it to you once a year, and I always said the same thing. Well, if you can only get it once a year, get one, then 6 months later, get it from the other 6 months later.
Right.
But we found that you can get them.
They don't care.
They don't care. Here it is.
But get your bureau.
But
absolutely
get it directly
see
from the bureau.
What's on there. If it's a legitimate debt, reach out to whoever the legitimate debt is with, whether it's a lawyer or a collection agency or the original creditor. See, and resolve it if you can. If it's not a legitimate debt or something is fishy, you have a right to file a dispute. And Equifax and TransUnion have online dispute forms that you can fill out. And it can be, this isn't my debt. This debt is over 6 years old. This debt is too much. If you dispute a debt, so this is worth mentioning. If you dispute a debt with a collection agency, the bureaus reach out to us. We get probably about 10 to 20 disputes a day. And they say, okay, Bob's disputing this debt. Is it legitimate? And in a lot of cases, the original creditor's just given us a spreadsheet. So we go back to the original creditor going, Bob's disputing this debt. We want their contract. Okay, here's a copy of the signed contract. And then we send it back to the bureau. Debt's legitimate. Here's the proof. But in some cases, we get a dispute. Is this debt legitimate? We reach out to the creditor. The creditor's like, oh, this isn't legitimate. Okay, then we would purge it from the bureau. It should never be there. So you can always dispute your debt. And there's a process where the bureau says, okay, we've got your side of the story. What's your side of the story? Do they match?
Yeah, and the dispute process is actually pretty simple now.
It is.
Because you log in to, let's say, Equifax, and you click on the creditor, and it says, I owe this much money. Well, you can right there on the screen click and say, I want to dispute that exact debt.
Exactly.
And something pops up. There's a little text box. You type it in. Well, I never borrowed. This is not mine, whatever the reason is.
Sure.
So it's not like the old days, the old days back in 5 years ago, when you sent it by mail, you got the thing, you had to fill out the form, write it in, send it back in the mail. It was always a 3-month process. We have a lot of cases now where credit reports are fixed within a month.
Right.
It's much smoother, but you got to actually do it.
And if you don't feel a debt's legitimate, you have every right to dispute it, or make a call or ask questions. You can't just take it blindly. Oh, this must be okay. If a debt has the wrong incurred date, like this debt's from 2024. No, it's not. It's from 2012. You have a right to dispute it. If a debt is $2,000 when you think it's $200, you have a right to dispute it. And if the creditor or agency can't back up their claims, the credit bureau will rule in your favor. They'll arbitrate it basically.
Yep. So the practical advice then is, you have no objection to having the apps on your phone to get alerts, but you want to get the full report that shows last activity date, everything.
Get it right from the source.
Right from the source. Yeah. Equifax and TransUnion, you can get them online, and you don't have to pay for them. These are the free reports. If you want to see your credit score directly from Equifax and TransUnion, you got to pay for that. But
you don't need, the apps will tell you what your score is. You
exactly.
don't need to.
If you get the information correct, then that's going to improve your score.
Absolutely.
So that's why you want to focus on that.
If you do have the apps, don't sweat your score changing every week.
Right. Because it will.
The wind blows in a different direction and your score changes 5 points.
Right.
The app is a great alert tool. It's a great, is there something on there that doesn't belong there? But go to the source.
Right. I totally agree. If you're getting a mortgage, then yes, you want to check your credit score, but to be checking it every day is just insane.
And it'll drive you crazy.
Yeah, it absolutely will. So do not obsess over it. So, okay, well, that's fantastic. So I guess the big picture advice is, get your credit report, clean up any mistakes that are obvious on it. If you have a debt that's legit and you can pay it, then pay it.
Sure.
Talk to the collection agency. Well, I can't give you all the money today, but here's the plan I can work out.
And if you're negotiating with the agency, you can negotiate them not reporting it to the bureau. And in some cases, you can negotiate them freezing interest or penalties or what have you. Or if you have lump sum, you can negotiate a lump sum settlement. For bigger creditors.
But if you don't ask, you're not going to get it.
That's right.
So, don't be a prick. Pick up the phone, talk to them.
And that's the biggest thing. Agencies spend 80% of their time trying to reach people, just to tell them. And we left 8 messages and couldn't reach them. We put it on the bureau and the person calls up, 2 years later, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah,
well,
we tried. Yeah. We tried. So don't run from it. So if you can make payment arrangements, great. Obviously, my business is when you can't make payment arrangements, because not only do I owe you, but I owe 5 other people, and the total debt is so big that paying this guy and then having the other 4 guys garnishing your wages doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
So in that case, you give our office a call. We do a consumer proposal, a bankruptcy, whatever is necessary. So, okay, well, that's some very good advice. And if anybody from the city of Ottawa wants to talk, how can they get in touch with you, Blair?
I have a blog. I haven't written an article in a while, but receivableaccounts.com.
So we will put links in that to the show notes, receivableaccounts.com.
And I do get emails from consumers saying, I have this weird circumstance. What do I do? I'm happy to answer those. And often they'll say, well, I can't get a hold of anyone at this agency. I know all the people at all the agencies,
Yeah.
you know, we're all in the same business. I can point them in the right direction.
Yeah, and your industry is like every other industry. People know each other.
Yeah.
I know that you're involved in the Receivables Management Association, for example. So you're actually chatting with your compatriots on a very regular basis. So by all means, reach out. So I'll put that link in the show notes. And then obviously Kingston Data and Credit, you can Google that. It's pretty easy to find, and you've got ways to contact you there as well. So Blair, thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That is our show for today. A new show is released every Saturday morning, so please like and subscribe and click the buttons, you know, the whole routine, do all that sort of stuff. Some of the episodes are actually pretty good, you know, so I think people should actually listen to them. And you can also subscribe to the audio version, which is what most people do. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube now is going audio as well. They're doing, that's apparently Google Podcasts isn't a thing anymore. It's all going to be YouTube, because I don't know how it all works, but you guys figure it out. Search for Debt Free in 30. You can find us anywhere. So thanks for watching and listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 36 minutes. That's pretty good.
That's pretty good for us.
We did well. That was Debt Free in 30.